Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here again with us today. We're going to go through, this is Ken Shoulders number six, and we're going to go through a couple papers Brendan's going to read to us. One of them is called EVO Oscillations, The Friendly Enemy, written by Ken Shoulders. And the other one is pretty interesting. It's UFOs and EVOs, so how they relate to each other, again by Ken Shoulders, and there's a trademark of 2008 on that one. So and everyone in the group, if you guys have questions or if you want to jump in or anything, just absolutely do that, because that's why we're all here together, is to sort of learn together. So I'll let you go, Brandon. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Eddie. Okay, so the title of this is EVO Oscillation, The Friendly Enemy by Ken Shoulders. The basis of gain. EVO gain shows itself in the form of a high thrusting force output for EVO gain shows itself in the form of a high thrusting force output for a meager electrical input control power. Normally, the thrust is developed against condensed material that is fluidized by the EVO passage and is registered as an easily measured and potentially useful momentum imparted to the material. In this case, energy must be regained thermally from the fluid mass transported, implying a disruption to the initial shape of the structure used, leading to a short apparatus lifetime. This basic gain mechanism is also available to a pure electronic system if a proper load is placed on the accelerated EVO, acting as a cluster of electrons capable of inducing useful fields in the load. In this case, material is not moved and the structure lifetime is not jeopardized. Whenever a gain of over 1 manifests itself, oscillation can occur in any system, providing a feedback of 180 degrees between the input and output.
Mm.
The magnitude of oscillation depends on non-linear elements incorporated in the feedback path. The beneficial effect of gain can quickly turn to a disaster if not properly regulated. Light generation. If either a single EVO or a thin plane of them is appropriately placed between a reflector and a partial reflector, as is done in laser technology, then an oscillation will occur at a frequency set by the dimensions of the separation, providing the necessary 180-degree phase shift, and a useful output of light is provided in the direction of the partial reflector. Once started, likely from a noise source, energy is no longer needed to power the array, and light is emitted as long as the structure endures. The frequency of the emitted light is determined by the physical separation of the phase shift elements, while the amplitude is a function of designed in saturation elements, modulators, and the area of the array. Using this method, photons can be emitted from the array at any wavelength capable of supporting the necessary phase and amplitude feedback conditions. The range for a parallel reflector technique would likely extend from the X-ray region down through high microwave frequencies.
Hmm.
Low frequency energy generation. From a low microwave radiation range down through audible frequencies, lumped circuit feedback and control elements most conveniently generates power. It should be clear that in inadvertent modules, inadvertent modes of feedback at off-center frequencies could generate spurious output capable of destroying the apparatus,
Mhm.
as EV itself knows nothing about the limitations of the apparatus. The modulation of either frequency or amplitude output in this range of frequencies is manipulated by conventional means within the feedback loop. Static propulsion. Although technically just a continuation of the, static propulsion. Although technically just a continuation of the low frequency generation methods discussed above, static propulsion anywhere in this universe might mistakenly be included in a separate category. For the purpose of this discussion, there is no difference, and it must be made clear that the medium being thrust against for all purposes is the potentum itself, and
Hmm.
not anything so tangible as ordinary inertia. This condition was briefly discussed in a prior note titled An EVO Clutch and Microphone.
Oh, yes. Yep. We have that one. We'll go through it.
This file can be downloaded from this website. I'm not sure if this website is actually one of the guys in our Facebook group tried from the last week or the week before, tried something
Okay.
similar, so it might not be active.
Right. Yep.
Just as in the case of generating high frequency radiation, the static force exerted does so without any external power input. An all-axis referencing and feedback system is required to stabilize the position of an object being levitated. Otherwise, devastating oscillation occurs. Failure of the stabilization system in any way could result either in the supported object being capitulated, catapulted into,
Catapulted, yeah.
so
Yeah.
either and then, sorry, failure of the stabilization system in any way could result either in the supported object being catapulted into space or dashed into Earth.
Wow. So there's a lot going on there, isn't there? Um, the EVO clutch and microphone, we're definitely going to have to go to that one. And but what's so interesting, Chip, is that he keeps talking about putting things 180 degrees out of phase,
Mm.
right? That's the interesting part. And an object being catapulted into space. So obviously this technology works, right? That's
Yes.
that's the one
You
thing.
know, this is almost a hybridization of a Casimir device. I mean, you
Yep,
need to tune the distance between the plates, obviously, so you get a full wavelength resonance between the plates. And
yep,
he's discussing it in the EVO context.
yep.
Very interesting.
Yep, exactly. And
Yeah.
again, thank you, Chris Beskar, for giving us your business partners research so that we can go through it and learn from it, right? Because there's great nuggets in all of this.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, but yeah, and the feedback. So basically, he's saying that you can get this stuff going, but if you don't control it with feedback, it'll literally just self-destruct because
Yeah.
it's got so much power essentially. And the fact that you don't need inputs of power to, once things are started, to get all these processes done is fantastic, right? But that's what it's all about, EVO oscillations. So once you get the oscillations moving, things start happening because of the non-linearities of everything as well, too. The materials, like he was talking about, there was non-linearity in part of the feedback system to keep this thing operating within its range. So that's really
Yeah.
cool.
Electrogravitics. This
Yep.
is why it's going to fly through the roof of the house here. It's gonna,
Yeah.
it's going to be some mass cancellation involved with the unstable EVO field.
Yep. Yep. Amazing. Um, so maybe we'll go on to the next one because this one kind of relates to the one we just talked about, and it's called UFOs and EVOs. So we're probably going to learn a little bit more of the practical part of how this all works. And just for those out there, I haven't read these actually. We're kind of learning as we go, and I'm going to go back after and highlight all the good stuff, and then I'm going to write in my journal so there's a real good stuff on charge clusters and whatnot in Ken Shoulders' work.
Okay, I'll start reading.
Thank you. Yep.
UFOs and EVOs by Ken Shoulders, 2008. When did he pass away? Was it around about?
You know what? I forget actually. It was after that. A lot of the stuff we have from Ken Shoulders is from 2008 and in that region, 2005. Yep.
Okay, background. This writing is an unexpected event for the author, as he is not a UFO buff, but an observed but has observed many correlations between the reported behavior of UFOs as seen by others and EVO behavior seen personally in the laboratory. The reporting here is tardy in that the author has never had a need to make such a comparison. However, due to a recent association with a group seeking to construct a UFO type of vehicle,
Oh,
it is apropos to document some of the correlations. In this note, attempts will be made to reconcile the two sets of observations and see what is the outcome. In this note, attempts will be made to reconcile the two sets of observations and see what the outcome is. Knowing that there can be no definitive treatise, how do you pronounce that? Treatise at
yeah.
this time, and that only some shallow inferences can be drawn. This writing exercise is therefore intended primarily as a precursor for discussions with the resident specialists on UFO behavior in this newly formed group or any other related physics group with an interest in possible interactions between UFO and EVO technologies.
Yeah.
The views expressed will be kept on an observational level as much as possible to allow the widest audience engagement. Some references to EVO work can be found at this reference here, number one. So it's this reference. Is it there? No, it's not on there. Okay. So reference one.
Okay.
EVO space observations. Laboratory observations begin with a light fringe shift seen when looking for transmission or scattering of light from an EVO as it moves slowly within the observation field of a simple interferometer. If the fringe shift seen proves valid under more highly defined conditions of observation, such as a bona fide interference pattern shift,
Mhm.
then it would mean that the light velocity in the region affected by the EVO is shifted in an upward direction. That
Wow.
would be an that would be an incredible find in itself, as everything else in nature shifts the velocity downward from that found in the vacuum medium. The measurements are, sorry, that would be an incredible find in itself, as everything else in nature shifts the velocity downward from that found in the vacuum medium. The measurements are made in effect. Permittivity of space is reduced in the region near an EVO.
That is a huge statement right there. HF
Oh
permitted.
my God. Yeah.
That's the magic sauce right there, actually.
Yeah, it's how you create a warp field and polarize the gravity field around it and fly 3 million times the speed of light.
Awesome.
It
A
changes
second,
permittivity.
Yeah. And actually there's a full paper on this that we will dive into at some point on permittivity of yeah, everything. Very, very important. Okay, Brandon, sorry.
a secondary observation class seen and reported in many ways is the reduction in charge and mass, or not only the EVO itself. Sorry, I'll read that again. A secondary observation class seen and reported in many ways is the reduction in charge and mass of not only the EVO itself, but also the atomic material that is deliberately sequestered within it.
Wow.
Although this is a frequent and ubiquitous observation made by the author, the methods used for measurement are not classically defined enough for easy acceptance by the scientific community. As with many such advanced citations, that community will have to wait before unfolding such notions, as the author does not intend to extend his work any further in their direction.
Hmm.
He is personally convinced enough of the effect to keep moving in the indicated forward direction.
Mhm.
Charge to mass ratio constancy. When looking for other effects caused by EVO sequestering, I do not expect to find any that are dependent on a variable Q for charge, obviously, Q over M. M, I think, is
Mhm.
mass. Q over M. I'm not sure, so you have to check that out. Because this charge and mass, yeah, so it's charge and mass, Q over M. Because this
Yep.
charge and mass reduction effect, so I'll read that again. When looking for other effects caused by EVO sequestering, I do not expect to find any that are dependent on a variable Q over M, charge over M, mass. Because this charge and mass reduction effect seems to maintain a constant ratio with any state of EVO engagement.
Hmm.
From this, one would not expect to see a shift in the wavelength of light from atomic emission as EVO effects engulf or sequester the atomic species. This is because the frequencies generated are due to unchanged elastic and mass ratio effects. Although highly speculative at this early point in time, I would expect all life forms we presently know to remain safe when enshrouded by EVOs,
Hmm.
as these life forms also seem to be Q over M, charge over mass based. What seems very bad for any atomic or molecular organization is to be caught in the enormously steep charge gradient of the EVO itself.
Wow, yeah, I get that.
The warning here is that one should step around an EVO and not through it.
Hmm.
Do you want to do the other ones as well?
Yep, yeah, you betcha. Yeah, this is a continuation of there's page 2 and 3 of this one.
Yeah, there's some interesting points about the blue light shift. He's talking about the compressive effect it would seem to have in the varying the permittivity of space around the EVO.
Mhm.
I have a video of a ship going to superluminal velocities, and I see the same thing in the video. But
Oh,
as it creates a warp field around it, you see the blue light as it's compressing the grav field in front of it just prior to the envelope of the warp field developing, and
yeah.
then shifting to green and yellows on the back end. So
Hmm.
the ship is creating, it's changing the permittivity and the polarization of the space immediately around it,
Yeah.
so that when it creates its own warp shell, it's neutral, it's consistent. And so
And
it seems like the EVO here in terms of correlating it with UFO activity is consistent in many ways. And why there appears to be a blue compression, a speed up, a luminal speed up, is a little peculiar, right? Because it's not necessarily moving, but it is changing the event horizon right around it in a sense.
yeah, um,
I don't
maybe
understand that. Yeah.
yeah, we can probably go back or circle around to this and think about it in the terms of subquantum kinetics as well too, right?
Yes. Let's
To
do
see,
that. Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, this is fantastic information again. Thank you, Chris. Best car, definitely.
Okay. Encapsulating or enshrouding the vehicle. When considering enshrouding an ordinary structure with a blanket of EVOs, there is something like a zipping up operation to consider for getting things started. As I see it, this can come in many ways. Simplest way is to use a plastic or dielectric covering of the structure with EVO guides placed judiciously around the vehicle.
Mm.
The structures used could closely resemble a single layer like those described in patents granted to shoulders for flat panel displays using EVOs.
Yes, yeah.
And there's a reference there, but it's not at the bottom. Okay, so it's
It's at the bottom. It's at the bottom of this
at the bottom, the
page.
last page.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
The
That's shown.
the startup operation loads EVOs into the guides provided by the structures, and the show begins with the lights from the outside world fading slowly as the charge builds.
Mhm.
If the rules for EVO if the rules for EVO coverage are the same as the rules for EM shielding, then there is a certain percentage of covering whereby enough is enough, knowing that more is better.
Mhm.
The underlying assumption here is that the enclosed space is in equilibrium with the covering medium. As the percentage covering increases, the mass of the vehicle and its inhabitants decreases for any fixed state of EVO excitation.
Wow. And this what he's talking about here is actually called, technically it's called the vacuum plasma bubble sheath that surrounds the ship. Um, so that's just terminology, and that terminology is from David Wilcock and Chris Beskar against
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
right?
It is conscious and in most cases sentient.
Yep, yep, absolutely, especially with intergalactic ships.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah. Okay, sorry, Brandon.
This is
Yeah.
basically a form of instant weightlessness that is produced by EVO encapsulation.
Wow.
Operations using the vehicle can be carried out at very high acceleration, as viewed by those under normal conditions, without the occupants enclosed being aware of the acceleration.
Wow. That's a huge statement right there.
There is obviously an upper limit to attainable velocity, and it is likely set by the degree of EVO darkness controlling the expressed charge and mass of the shroud and all things within it.
So the shroud is that vacuum plasma bubble sheath.
In making these distinctions, it seems debatable whether one calls the effect anti-gravity or mass reduction.
Hmm.
In our non-EVO world, we are just not used to the effect of mass reduction, and so our bias favors using the term anti-gravity.
Mm-hmm.
I greatly prefer the mass reduction description with
Mm-hmm.
an additional EVO type of propulsion used for directional control. Portals. When entering or leaving the vehicle, the portal would seem to be normal in every way, as the transition from one region of space to another would be through a mild enough gradient to be safe.
Mm-hmm.
A large opening in the EVO shield essentially provides this mild gradient.
Great.
The surface of the vehicle would feel bumpy from within due to gravitational variations if the EVO containing sheet were rough. Large regions of shroud emission would give the effect of suck holes, whereby the increased gravity from the outside would exert a traction force. Under such conditions, there is a danger of getting sucked out of a large hole and into the exterior region of the EVO shroud.
Wow.
At this point, I cannot see any overwhelming difficulty with being caught half in and half out of the shrouded region, except for the tensile force provided by gravity in whatever region you find yourself. For all intent and purposes, this can be considered a mild form of black hole.
Hmm.
Beware of this effect when operating near Jupiter. Control of the entire craft would seem to be a snap, considering how willing EVOs are to perform and be directed under control. So I'll read that again. Control of the entire craft would seem to be a snap, considering how willing EVOs are to perform and be directed under control. There is the extremely important consideration of being accidentally controlled by extraneous fields from outside. Simple system proposed here is a minimal one in terms of shielding from such disturbing influences. This limitation includes collision with physical trash. Shield would have the ability to destroy some small amount of debris, but this is likely done at the expense of producing a local failure in encapsulation.
Hmm.
The EVO encapsulation would be as leaky as a sieve to atmospheric pressure differences, and conventional enclosures would seem necessary to maintain cabin pressure integrity unless an EVO pump was used.
Hmm.
Velocity effects. Since light traverses a region influenced by EVOs, it should also pass completely through a vehicle with optically transparent ports. There is an expectation of increased velocity of the light as it passes through the interior of the vehicle in accordance with the alteration of its space properties. What this means in terms of velocity limits for the ensemble of parts comprising the vehicle is not known for sure, but anything within the EVO encapsulation can be considered as having superluminal capability
Wow.
when referenced to our norm. Presumably, the darker the EVO covering, the lower the mass of objects within, and the higher the light velocity limitation allowed. Should we go on to the next one?
Yep, you betcha. That's the last one. Wow. There's a lot going on with that, wasn't there? Holy
I can see why Chris likes these papers.
cow. Wow.
Yeah, I
There's,
can't understand at this point why there'd be a limitation in the velocity or the acceleration of the craft. We'd have to probe that offline a little bit, I think.
yeah, yeah.
So that's
And look,
that's the reference they were referencing there.
yep, yep. So the
Cloaking.
last cloaking, yeah.
Aside from the transport properties being proclaimed here due to the effective lowering of mass, another property of interest also shows itself. In this treatment of UFOs, it is claimed that encapsulating an object with EVOs essentially gives the object some properties of the EVOs shrouding it. Under this assumption, an enshrouded object would become as invisible as the EVOs themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Although the electromagnetic reflection and scattering properties of an EVO have not been determined with accuracy, the white or active state is capable of both generating light as well as reflecting light. Anything covered or sequestered within EVOs in the white state would thus be expected to both glow and appear shiny under external illumination.
Mm.
With EVOs converting into the black state, they essentially withdraw from our cognizance by allowing light to pass through them.
Oh, wow. Hmm.
As simple as this laboratory test is, there are no valid measurements of the effect other than to say that guides below the EVO appear normal when viewed optically. This lack of black EVO observation would simply be due to either the short time of passage for the particular measurements made or the smallness of the EVO. Tests on static black EVOs are needed for conclusive evidence of their optical properties. If the black EVO is transparent, and the assumption that any cloaked material would take on specialized properties of the enshrouding EVO, then the conclusion one could draw is that the sequestered object within the EVO influence would also be transparent to electromagnetic radiation.
Wow.
Even if radar could detect the object, it would appear to have no thickness because the time delay through it is very short due to the velocity of light increase within the encapsulated space. Physical objects would react according to their electrical properties. Dielectrics would give a repulsive effect when pressed against an EVO enshrouded object.
Wow.
According to their reduced mass, while metallic or conductive objects, would cause a mighty disruption. Again, according to the interactivity of the state of EVO darkness. Black EVOs are known to transmit through metallic objects without interaction. This leads to the assumption that a form of shield is available that is capable of protecting the cloaked vehicle and its occupants against harm from normal material. The outstanding difference between a simple covering for a UFO giving propulsion via mass reduction properties and the covering form necessary for cloaking is that there must be no remnants of standard material protruding outward from the sheath. This suggests that an effective cloaking device or shield would necessarily involve an array of EVOs that are appropriately bound or interconnected to each other without intervening material. EVOs that are appropriately bound I'll read that again. This suggests that the effective cloaking device or shield would necessarily involve an array of EVOs that are appropriately bound or interconnected to each other without intervening material of the ordinary kind on the outer skin.
Wow. And there's that reference. It just says to reference the website. Well, now we know how it works, right? It's the shroud is EVOs, the vacuum plasma bubble sheath. So it can be used to cloak, and it can also be used for propulsion.
So cloak is like invisibility.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. Exactly. And invisibility. So he's basically talking about two things that basically UFOs, that we know this stuff has been observed by many people, and there's many films and movies about it that people have taken, and observations that people have had. Would you have any comments, Chip? What do you think about all this?
Yeah, I do. When you start varying charge density, in other words, manipulating spin entropy, etc., in the medium,
Yep.
You are playing not just with physical transparency, you are playing with time.
Yep.
So the cloak may actually be not a physical disappearance of molecular material. It may be a time slip.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
interesting, right?
the problem
Wow.
is not where the ship is, it's when it is. And that
Yep.
does that doesn't require much of a slip, and suddenly it's not in this realm.
Yep.
And so, yeah, the cloaks are very sophisticated, the skin of the ships, and you're playing with gravity, of course. So gravity and time are intertangled. And so I could see producing a time effect, a time temporal transparency, if you will, along with dark and white reflectivity, absorption, etc., in the EVOs themselves.
Yep. Wow. And then, of course, and what we're trying to learn about here is the difference between a white EVO and a black EVO, and
Yeah,
the states in between too, right? Because there's the gray AVOs. They're all, different states as we move along. But there's some incredible nuggets of information in both these papers, right?
yeah. These
Yeah.
are the coolest papers I've heard so far.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yes,
And
yeah.
there's I have two binders full of this stuff. So
Jeez.
there's much, much more to be shown. And again, thank you, Chris Beskar, for giving your business partners research to us, who was Ken Shoulders. And Ken Shoulders and John Hutchison are the superstars in all of this, along with Chris, of course. And always remember too that always remember Pete Peterson, because Pete Peterson mentored Chris Beskar at Area 51, and a lot of this stuff came from Pete as well. Pete was the smartest man that was ever at Area 51 ever, essentially. I think they called him Doctor Who or something like that. Yeah. Gabriel said he had a question. What have you got?
Hello guys, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, thanks.
So my question is, I think that in order to us have this cloak, we first need to concentrate the white EVOs, and then when these white EVOs pass to the state of dark EVOs,
Yep.
is when this cloak is activated, because uh,
Yep.
the matter, let's say that matter entangle with these EVOs, so it follows what the behavior of the EVO. So I think that if you just concentrate a lot of black EVOs in matter, it will not cause anything, because black EVOs can pass and
Yep.
basically doesn't interact with matter. So in order to it interact, it first needs to be in the white state, and then in the white state, passing to the black state is when this shield is activated. I think this is the way it's activated. Is it correct, my idea, or not?
Well, here's something that I know. Nikola Tesla himself did an experiment that almost killed him, and it was actually his assistant that actually shut everything off that caused him to live through this. And I remember that he said he was talking about voltage levels. And my understanding is when you go to 3.5 million volts of potential, that's when you start punching through and causing these effects to happen with cloaking and other effects essentially. So it in my understanding now, it's all got to do with the voltage potential. And what else was I going to say about that? Voltage potential.
Yeah, charge mass density. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And charge mass density. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Paul has a charge mass coupling in this SQK book.
Yes. Could we find that actually while we're still recording? Because we talked about that as being the holy grail of physics.
Yes.
And it literally is on the very, very first page of my papers,
I
you
know.
guys. It was the first thing that I wrote down, literally.
Yeah.
Because
And
it's
that's what
so important, right?
was tripping up Richard Feynman originally in that letter. Right?
Exactly.
I
And
He
then
think
didn't
it's
want to.
down.
He didn't want to go beyond the Coulomb
yeah,
repulsive attraction issues. Yeah.
yeah. That was so amazing that Ryan found that letter and shared it with us just at the proper time. One thing I am going to do, I haven't shared it with Chris Beskar yet. I'm going to send it to him. I'm sure he's seen it before, but I'm just going to say we found this and this is so cool. And,
Just
you
put
know,
coupling in there, coupling.
yeah. But yeah, there's a, find it
Here
here.
it is here.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll read it out. Let's just okay. This is Paul writing in the SQK book. We also know that the end plates of his gravitator measured 10 centimeters on a side and were separated by a 60 centimeter long dielectric that had a dielectric constant of K equals 26. Based on this, we can calculate that when fully charged to 150 kilovolts, its plates held a charge of Q equal 5.75 times 10 to the minus 7 coulombs. And with these, Q equals voltage times dielectric constant, permittivity of free space, area over distance. Okay.
Some,
If the above estimated positive or negative gravity potential deviation from the norm is divided by this corresponding source charge, we arrive at the electrogravitic ratio G. G is gravitational potential in subquantum kinetics,
yep.
measured in concentration, measured as potential concentration in potential. And that would, in classical physics, that would be joules per kilogram over
Okay.
charge.
Yep.
So he's measuring, so phi G over Q for charge, gravitational potential over Q for charge equals minus 5.2 times 10 to the 8 centimeters squared per second squared per coulomb, which represents the coupling between charge and gravity potential.
Wow. Thank you, Paul. That's amazing.
Alternatively, we could express this in terms of a coupling between charge and virtual mass.
Mm-hmm.
Given that phi gravitational potential phi g equals plus or minus 300 centimeters squared per second squared, and that the plate has a characteristic radial dimension of r approximately equal to 5 centimeters, the equivalent virtual mass that would produce this potential is virtual mass m, equals phi g for gravitational potential, r for radial dimension, over g, which I think is the gravitational constant. I think it's the gravitational constant. So equals 2.25 times 10 to the 10 grams. Hence, the coupling between charge and virtual mass is given by Q, m over q equals 3.9 times 10 to the 16 grams per coulomb. So 40 billion tons of virtual mass could be generated per coulomb of charge. I think 1 coulomb is quite a lot. Is that correct? 1 coulomb is quite a lot. It's like 1
Yeah.
Tesla.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Coupling
Absolutely.
between electrostatic and gravitational fields is predicted neither by general relativity nor by conventional field theory. In fact, Brown's pioneering 1929 paper that first reported the discovery of electrogravity was turned down by Physical Review because of its conflict with general relativity theory.
Huh.
Because of the challenge it had posed to conventional theory, much of the research on electrogravitics has pressed forward, not in academic laboratories, but in private firms and in classified programs outside of public awareness.
You bet it has.
We will now briefly review some of Brown's subsequent experimental work, as well as evidence that this gravity control technology has been under secret development since the 1950s.
Yep. Unreal. So there you go. And this Brendan, of course, is from the 6th edition that you're
Sixth edition on page 428.
Yeah, and sometime this year, we're going to have a hard copy of this out with the Starburst Foundation that
And
Brandon's
you
been
might be
working
able
on.
to, so we'll have it, so we'll try and have it so that you could either get a hardback with color, glossy paper, or if you want to, you could get a paperback with black and white,
Yeah,
if you wanted to. So you should be able to have a choice.
and a PDF that goes with them as well.
Wow.
A
So
PDF will
let's
come free. It will come free with the book.
Yep, very cool.
the 40 billion tons is an interesting number. It's obviously huge.
Yeah,
But let's not forget, we can also come up with a negative 40 billion tons in terms of mass cancellation.
yep, yeah.
Jesus.
Unbelievable. All right. Well, does anybody have any more comments or questions? And if not, we can finish the recording, then we can carry on with our conversation here.
Okay, then. Okay, thank you everyone for watching.
Yeah.
Have a wonderful rest of the day.
Yeah. Thank you.
Cheers.